All right, let's go ahead and get started with class. You've got all the handouts, I believe. I'm going to pass out some of these little yellow stickies. We're going to do a quick exercise. We need 6 individual stickies. So just take 6 and pass it on. These. Someone else. All right. So today we're starting a 2-section lecture or 2-section workshop on emotional intelligence. I'm of course going to tell you what I think emotional intelligence is and why we're doing it in a communications class. But I want to start with some discussion, some ideas from you. I asked you to take a look at a short video and take an emotional intelligence quiz. So hopefully that got some ideas generated. So let's just start it off. Who can tell us a little bit about what emotional intelligence is and why I might be having you do it in business communications class? Great.
Well, I'm probably not the right person to speak about this. My score wasn't great.
Okay.
I would say that it's about having empathy and being able to understand someone's feelings without, necessarily getting it out of them directly through words.
Okay. Empathy, understanding someone else's feelings. Important for communication. Excellent. What else? Matt.
Knowing yourself and knowing how you would interact.
Yes, so knowing myself. So this is the type of person who dislikes authority. I'm the type of person who needs to be in charge. So there might be a problem. I need to negotiate very carefully if I'm going to try to manage that person. Great example. Great example.
And also how to deal with difficult situations, how you tackle the problem.
Yes, how you deal with difficult situations, but particularly, how does emotional intelligence help you with
Like
that?
conflicts and people.
Yes. Okay, so dealing with difficult situations, dealing with conflicts, and I would say in particular to add to that comment, it's the emotions that you're going to experience when you get into that conflict. And as Matt said, knowing yourself, this is going to make me angry, and I may not be the best manager when I'm angry. Or knowing other people, as Ricky was saying, and being able to empathize with someone. All right, this manager has a lot of stress going on right now. He's up for promotion. He's probably stressed about this goal, so I'm not going to ride him too hard about this. I'm going to approach the conversation this way. Good thoughts to get us started. Anything else? All right. So let me give you a couple of definitions just to start off our framework of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, from I think one of the tests you took, is defined as the ability to identify, use, understand, and manage emotions in positive ways, to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. So good stuff, right? We would love to be able to do all this, especially if we're in a very tense work environment where we need to win over managers, win over employees. Identify, as we talked about, identify our emotions, empathize with others, understand what's going on with them, and learn how to use that effectively in a business environment. If you have high emotional intelligence, you're able to recognize the emotional state, your emotional state, and the emotional states of others, and engage with them in a way that draws them to you. Again, recognizing your own emotional state of others, and thinking about how the best way to create that interaction. This was developed in 1985 by this guy Wayne Leon Payne, but more notably developed by Daniel Goleman in 1995 with this book. And the thing that Goleman did that made it catch on more in the business world is he focused on effective job performance. He said emotional intelligence is not just this touchy-feely, how do you feel, how do I feel, let's talk about it. It's how we can use that to be effective managers and drive business results. He looked at some factors that he felt drove management success around effective job performance. He asked the question, he said, what makes a good manager? What makes someone who can effectively lead people? Is it a high IQ? IQ is important. You have to have some intelligence. But we all know people who are really smart, who are not good at their jobs, and we really dislike working for them for one reason or another. So this is important, but this is not the key factor. He asked the question, is it job skills? Maybe you're not the smartest person, but you really know your job. You know real estate, you know finance, you know how to run those reports. That is important also, but only in an initial setting, or only initially, I guess. You need intelligence, you need job skills, but as you get further and further up in management, as you start working with more and more people, job skills and IQ is not what makes the difference in whether people like you, whether people want to work for you, and whether you're able to effectively drive business results. And he found, based on there are a couple different ways he ran this test, depending on how you slice and then dice it. Some of his data says 80% of emotional intelligence, or 80% of job effectiveness is determined by emotional intelligence, and then 20% of job effectiveness is determined by the other two. He looked at it a variety of different ways, but I'll just throw out that number as a figure that he often referenced. He found that what attributed the most to effective job performance were these emotional intelligence skills. The ability to understand your emotions, understand the emotions of people around you, and use that information to draw people to you. I'm going to break down emotional intelligence into 3 different components so we can understand how each of these things work together. There are different ways to slice and dice them. I think Goldman sliced them into 5 different components, but I want to break them down into 3. The first, self-awareness. Understanding what's going on with you. I used a couple examples. I'm very angry right now. I may not be the best manager when I'm angry. I need to be aware of that and think about how that's going to affect my job performance. Self-awareness. The other category I like to put everything into, emotional management. So I'm upset. Upset that I'm trying to make my copies and someone came in and is giving me attitude. But if I give attitude back to this person, then they're going to mess with my parking permit or whatever, and it's just going to cause me more problems. So it's important that I manage that frustration and work with that person in a positive way. Or I used the example earlier, I'm angry right now. I'm not the most effective manager when I'm angry. How can I manage that in a positive way? And the third piece, the third bucket I like to put everything into, social management. How can we, once we empathize with each other, with others, once we understand what might be going on with them, we can think about ways to interact with them in a positive manner. I used the example earlier, suppose you're working with someone who dislikes authority. How can you use that information to effectively work with that person socially? Any questions so far? So to the question of why am I teaching this in a business communications class, I'm going to throw out a couple ideas, 3 ideas. 1, when we communicate, we indicate our emotional intelligence. When you hear someone talk, giving a larger speech, or when you interact with someone on a one-to-one level, you can tell, is this a person who's really angry? Is this a person who understands how I feel? Or is this a person who doesn't care how I feel or doesn't know how I feel? When we communicate, we show all of those things to our audience. Another example. You might hear an audience member say something like this after you give what you think is a great presentation. The audience might say, the topic was presented well, but not received well. So what does that mean? Presented well, but not received well. Chen Fu?
The audience doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the audience doesn't know what I'm talking about. So I might venture to say that that wasn't presented well, but the person who makes this statement might say that it sounds like you went to a business communications class and did zip zap zoom and you practiced your PowerPoint presentation, you did all those quote unquote techniques the right way, but for some reason it didn't resonate with your audience. So, Blake, do you have something here?
Yeah, is it different from, when I read that, I thought that the topic was presented fine, like you were detailed and knowledgeable about what you were talking about, and that the recipient of the message was just upset or insulted or somehow hurt by what you were saying.
Okay, I could go with that interpretation, but I would say that in that case, especially, it's not presented well. Because the way we judge whether or not it's presented well is how your audience receives it. If you have a goal, you need to present yourself to an audience. Maybe you need to present yourself to someone who's interviewing you for a job. Present yourself to someone socially and you want them to like you. You use all these techniques that I might teach you in a class like this to accomplish that goal. And no matter how effectively you use the quote-unquote techniques, whether you reach that person is your ultimate measure of success. And so we need to think about being in touch with our audience, and emotional intelligence is a way to help us think about empathizing with our audience and understanding how we can connect with them more effectively. And it's more obvious, Blake, if we look at a one-on-one conversation. And that's when we'll use emotional intelligence, or we'll think more about emotional intelligence, because you'll have a better understanding of your audience because it's only one person. We can use examples such as you might scare that person, you might intimidate that person, and no matter how well-reasoned your argument is, if that person is not hearing your message, not receiving it well, then it's not going to be effective. Does that make sense? How about this? One last thought about why I'm teaching emotional intelligence in a business communications class. Suppose as a speaker you might find yourself saying, I say things I regret. Now this is a key value statement, I think, of emotional intelligence. An emotionally intelligent person will less often find themselves in this position when they say things they regret. Because they're able to understand what's going on with themselves, they're able to manage their emotions and think about the most effective way to present things. If you watch the Goldman video, you might recall him saying that it's a misnomer, that emotional intelligence is all about being nice. It's not necessarily about being nice. It's not necessarily about having easy conversations. Sometimes it's about having very difficult conversations that your audience may not like to hear. But the thing you don't want to do is lose your temper and say things that you regret. You want to be rational and you want to be thinking in the most effective way possible. Does that make sense? So let's do a quick exercise to think about how emotional intelligence skills may have affected you in your past roles. I'd like you to think about the best manager that you ever had, and I'd like you to also think about the worst manager that you've ever had. Now, the worst manager is more fun to think about. You get a chance to criticize. Think about the 3 attributes of the best manager you've had that made she or he the best manager. And think about the 3 attributes of the worst manager you've ever had. What attributes made that person the worst manager? Now, you could do this a couple ways. There's the self-assessment worksheet. The first page has some place where you can take those notes. But I'd also like you to use those 6 yellow stickies to write down the 3 best attributes and the 3 worst attributes. Anyone have any questions on this? Jim?
What if I only really had like one manager and they might have 3 of each, bad and good?
Well, I would say you can think of a professor, a teacher from college, maybe even a coworker. Think about what gave them good job performance skills, but think of them separately. Decide in your mind who's the best, then who's the worst, and put the 3 attributes for each. Okay, so as you're finishing that up, feel free to continue. But when you're ready, you're going to take your little stickies for the best manager you've had. You've got 3 attributes on 3 little stickies, and you're going to decide, would you put that attribute in terms of this manager's IQ? Would you say this attribute had something to do with, or more to do with job skill? Or would you say that this attribute had more to do with emotional intelligence? And you're going to put that sticky in this circle for the best manager. Similarly, for the worst manager, you're going to think about whether or not that attribute was related to IQ, job skill, or EQ. And you're going to put that sticky in the appropriate circle.
You have something that kind of implies the IQ and the job skill. I just put it in like the little in between area.
Yes, sure.
It's all EQ.
All right, so let's look at the data. Let's start with the best manager we've had. And this is whether one person likes someone because they were intelligent. We have a few people who like someone specifically because they had good job skill. What's the main thing we see on best manager?
EQ.
EQ is pivotally important to whether or not we like someone. They have to be somewhat smart, they have to be somewhat competent, but this is where we decide. These people make the best managers we've ever had. And someone years later asks you who is the best manager you've ever had, and you say, why? You cite skills associated with emotional intelligence. What do we see over on the worst manager we've ever had? EQ, I guess it's still very heavy EQ. We see a little more focus on job skill, which is fine. Perhaps we dislike people, and if they're incompetent, or if people are incompetent at their job, it stands out a little bit more in terms of the worst manager we've ever had. But still, it's EQ. These are the things that, for the most part, made them the worst manager we've had. They were condescending, they were critical, they were pessimistic, they were narrow-minded, they always blamed others, unable to relate, hurtful, no social skills, self-centered, confrontational, lazy, lack of self-awareness. So this is a powerful exercise. Puts us in, provides a great platform for us to think about how this was specifically relevant to our past experiences professionally. So let's look at these three categories: self-awareness, emotional management, and social management. Let's ask the question, what do you have if you have each of them? You have self-awareness. You have the ability to understand emotions and emotional effects. I understand that I'm angry now, and I know what effect that's going to have. I understand I feel jealous of this person, and I know what sort of effect that's going to have, and I'm going to think about a way to use that positively and not let that cloud my interaction with them. If you have self-awareness, you have congruent verbal and nonverbal signals. Congruent verbal and nonverbal body language. What does that mean? Congruent means the same.
Your body.
Priya?
Sorry. You're saying and showing the things that you're actually feeling is genuine.
Yes, you're saying and showing that you're actually feeling it's genuine. If you say, I'm very happy with this report, it's fine, but your body language just looks like you want to strangle someone, people are not going to believe you, people are not going to be drawn to you, people are going to really be freaked out by you. If you're the kind of person that just, has this rage that you're not acknowledging, that you're not able to express in a healthy way. If you have self-awareness, you have awareness of needs, strengths, and weaknesses. I'm going to bring this other one in. You also have awareness of values and goals. Let me break these apart. Let's look at needs for a minute. If you're not aware of your needs, does that mean you don't have needs? Yeah, you still have needs, you're just not aware of what they are. And if you've ever worked with someone who doesn't understand their own needs, it can be very difficult. They might tell you in weird, confusing ways, and if they were just able to say, okay, here's what I need. I'm not strong in this area, I need you to help out with this area, or do this or that, because this is a weakness of mine and this is a need that I have. That's a constructive way to interact. But if they don't have the skills and understanding to do that, then they can be very difficult to have on your team, they can be very difficult to work with. Similarly with strengths and weaknesses, values and goals, understanding where you're strong, understanding the value you do have to offer makes you an effective job performer. And not understanding that can often lead you to do confusing things. You may have worked with people on teams who don't understand that they're weak in something and don't understand that they should have someone else do it, but they're not able to express that, so on and so forth. If you have self-awareness, you have more self-acceptance and confidence. With an understanding of all these things, you can be confident about who you are and what you offer. You can say, look, I'm weak on these things. I understand that, I know that, and I know how to express my needs. but I also know where I'm strong and where I add value. That self-awareness can make you more confident, someone who's able to accept where you are. We talked about this a little bit with networking. Understand where you are and what you have to offer, and you can have that confidence. Emotional management. So what do you have if you are able to manage your emotions? First thing you have, rational thought. You act rationally. You don't lose your cool and act irrationally. It's a pretty big deal, right? Think about all the things you do when you're upset that you wish you hadn't done. I see some nods. Okay. All right. If you're able to control that, understand that, you're going to be thinking rationally all of the time, and you won't make that statement. I later sometimes say things I regret. What else do you have if you have emotional management? You have resiliency, patience, flexibility. You're able to overcome a slight bump in the road. You realize when things don't go exactly your way, you can be flexible. You can be patient, because you're not going to blow your rocker just because something happened that you didn't expect. And you can bounce back from various setbacks. If you're able to control that emotion and understand that it's not the end of the world. With that will also come confidence. We talked about confidence with self-awareness as well, but I'll bring it up here again. Knowing that you can overcome various obstacles because you have resiliency, patience, and flexibility will make you more confident as you go into what might be a difficult situation. Self-motivation. If you watch the Goleman video, Goleman puts motivation in a whole category by itself, but I like to put it in the emotional management category and say if you have emotional management skills, you have motivation. The reason I like to describe it that way is that we all have passion, we all have things we're interested in, we all have dreams, but the reason why we often don't achieve those, the reason why we stop ourselves, the reason why we lose motivation is because we're not able to overcome little obstacles, little bumps in the road. When we get frustrated by something that might be minor in retrospect, we lose our motivation. We lose our desire to continue with that goal, that passion, that dream. So if you're able to manage those little setbacks, you're not only going to have this good stuff, you're going to be able to keep that motivation to do what's important to you. Physical and mental health. Not walking around stressed all the time, saying, I really like this report, but not understanding why you're so stressed, blowing off steam. And it's important to understand what's upsetting you and how you can deal with that effectively. A healthy way of getting to the gym, working out that stress. Thirdly, social management. What do we have if we have social management skills? I'd like to break this into 3 categories. Diagnostic insight, empathy, skill to connect. So diagnostic insight is just looking at someone, understanding what they might be going through. Right? That person looks a little stressed right now. I'm going to make a note of that. Empathy. Thinking about why that person might be stressed. Saying if I were in that person's shoes, I might be stressed as well. I can literally feel your pain. I can empathize with you. And this is something that we can all do. We just need to stop and think about it. If we go through a thought process and see, gosh, this person may be feeling depressed because of this reason, this reason, this reason. Now that I've thought about that, I can empathize with it. And taking that understanding, that diagnostic insight, and that ability to empathize with someone else, and turning that into some sort of skill to connect. How am I going to interact with that person? Because I know those things and because I empathize with them. I'd like to throw out some questions, some EQ test questions. Some of these might have been on the EQ tests you took. Most of them came from another test that I don't use anymore because it was a really, really long test. And whatever, I won't go into the story. It was just a really, really long test. But I'm going to throw out test questions. And I'm going to ask you, is this person who has this trait someone who has high EQ or someone who has low EQ? And which of the three categories would we put it in? For example, suppose you were asked this on an EQ test site. It was to ask you, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Are you this person, are you not? I change my tone and behavior depending on who I am interacting with. So, this is the person who changes their tone and behavior depending on who they're interacting with. First question, is this a person of high IQ or high EQ or low EQ? And which of the three categories would we place it in to further understand EQ and think more about the analysis of EQ? High EQ, yes. Change my tone and behavior depending on who I'm interacting with. And which of the three categories would we put it in?
Social management.
Probably social management. Yeah. How about this one? I change my beliefs and values depending on who I'm interacting with. All right, who wants to take it? One at a time. Here. I agree. Low EQ. Which of the three buckets would we put this in?
Self-awareness.
Yeah, I like low EQ self-awareness for this one. If necessary, I can be courteous to a person I dislike. Christian.
High EQ and social management.
Okay. High EQ social management. Social management maybe. What might be another category we could put it in, Christian? Yeah, I would say it could be both. And I might lean more towards emotional management. Especially you really dislike the person, but understand that's important, so you're going to control that emotion somehow, manage it. I avoid difficult conversations, even if having those conversations is necessary and important. All right, who wants to? High EQ. I avoid difficult conversations. Why is it high EQ? Okay, smart enough to avoid this conversation, but the key thing is these conversations are necessary and important. So it is important you have this conversation, and it's necessary perhaps for some sort of job function that you have this conversation. So you don't want to avoid it. It's sort of biased in the way of the question. Necessary and important. So is it right if I call this a person with low EQ?
Yeah.
And which of the buckets would we put this in? Self-awareness, maybe? What do you think, Safik? Self-awareness? Yeah, maybe all three. So, I might lean more towards emotional management because you know there's some difficult emotions that are going to come up. Remember we talked earlier about emotional management and lead to confidence, knowing that you're going into a difficult scenario. You're going to be able to be patient, flexible, resilient. Olga?
But if you're not confident to support your arguments and to support conversation, it can be self-awareness.
Okay. I'd say job awareness, job skill is what you're talking about, maybe?
It can be anything. If we are talking about job, it can be job. But again, in job we can have different conversations regarding skills, regarding responsibilities.
Okay. Okay. So sure, there's a self-awareness component I would agree with that you need to understand how you might act going into this conversation. And that's why I said earlier, maybe a little bit of all. This one might be a little bit of all three. Good point. Good point. When I become occupied with negative thoughts, I cannot concentrate on anything else until it is resolved. Joe. Low EQ. All right. And which of the three buckets would you put it in? Self-awareness? Occupied with a negative thought, I cannot concentrate on anything. Okay. Everything is a little bit self-awareness, but to say that I would put this specifically in self-awareness, I would have to disagree. Priya? I would say emotional management. You're just so mad about this. can't control that your entire focus is on this issue. I would say that's an emotional management issue. When things get bad, I like to look at the bright side. Rick?
High EQ, emotional.
Yeah, what did you say, Satvik? Very high EQ? Yeah. I think this is really important.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, these people used to annoy me. Somebody would always say, let's look at the bright side. The car's only kind of on fire. But I've found this to be important. It's been important in my career. I've gone through a number of career transitions. The careers I had before didn't work out exactly as I thought, but being positive, I felt made a big difference. And you see this working in teams here in business school. Do you like having someone on your team who's always negative, who's always pessimistic? And the looking on the bright side can help you find ways to overcome these challenges. I am good at expressing my emotions and telling people how I feel. So,
The previous one is part of emotional management.
yes. Wait. When I look at things, yeah.
Self-motivation.
When I look at the bright side, I'd say emotional management, yeah. I'm good at expressing my emotions and telling people how I feel. Jim.
High EQ, I guess it could be emotional intelligence, or, sorry, emotional management, maybe social management, communicating with other people.
Okay. Actually, I might say the other one, self-awareness, more. And I understand, all these can kind of blend together, but for the most part, good at expressing my emotions and telling people how I feel. So you have to understand what your emotions are. But I definitely see your point, Jim, that you need to communicate this effectively. There's a social management aspect, but I would say key to this one is self-awareness. If I'm angry at someone, I need to immediately tell them how I feel. Rebecca.
Low EQ and social management.
I would agree with low EQ, a little bit social management. I would say it's Carrie, what do you think? I would say low EQ and emotional management would be the primary culprit, and Matthew has something he wants to add to this. But let me just say, I think emotional management is the primary culprit for this. You need to immediately tell people how I feel. Is it okay to take a deep breath? Think about it a day or two? Think about the best way to use the social management skills? Or do you have to tell them how you feel because you're just so mad? Matt?
I think go both ways. Because if you hold it in, it can do just as much damage. In some relationships.
Okay.
Relationships, but some.
Okay, so let's talk that through a little bit. So there might be a time where it's important to express how you feel. That's why I put these two together. I'm good at expressing my emotions and telling people how I feel. There's got to be a constructive way to do that. But if you're mad, and maybe let me pose this scenario to you. You're thinking about it, you realize just nothing good can come of this conversation right now. I need to take a breath, I need to take some space, I need to think about the best way to communicate. But even though you know that, you're just so mad you have to tell someone. I like to use the example of when you honk your horn at someone on the road. Often when you honk your horn at a person or someone on the road, either a percentage of the time it might be safety, awareness. You might need to tell them, no, don't turn into my lane. Don't do this, don't do that, and understand, try to stop an accident. I'd say that's some percentage of the time, but most of the time when you honk your horn at someone, what is it? It's just you're mad, and you want to express you're angry at that person. It does absolutely no good, except to let the other person know that you're mad. When you think about it later, there's no rational reason for me to do that. I guess you could be, maybe if you're just mad, then you're going to be more tense. So if you're less tense when you honk at them, I could see that argument. Relieve some stress somehow.
It's like the 49ers fan.
Yeah, that was good actually.
What's that?
When the fan ran across the field during the football game, he's just playing. It's like know.
He ran onto the field and went over to the Giants bench and did the Kaepernick where you like kiss your bicep. Like,
Okay.
on the field in the middle of the play.
Oh, because he was mad, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that's the first thing I thought of when I read
Did
this.
he
one.
get
Like,
arrested?
that's so irrational. Oh
He
yeah.
got walked up.
If he was in a car, he would have honked.
Okay.
I was thinking,
It was a little worse than that.
I was thinking more in the sense of like a relationship, like an actual relationship, like a significant other.
Okay.
Like imagine, or not even actually, like somebody you see on a daily basis where if you hold it in, it's something that's really mad and it happens again before you can let it out, then you're just gonna erupt and it's gonna be 10 times worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, again, that's why I put these two together. Right? You need to be able to express your emotions and tell people how you feel, but you need to understand when you need to not be controlled by that. I think that's the way this question is worded. I need to immediately tell them how I feel. If you are a victim to this, I'm going to call you low EQ. I say things I regret, we already talked about. I often think about the ethical implications of my actions. Yeah. Okay, high EQ, I agree with. Self-awareness, a little bit. I might say there's a little more than self-awareness going on. If you had to pick one of the other two, in addition to self-awareness, what would you say? Yeah, I might say some social management. Empathy. So understanding how someone else is going to feel because of my actions is the basis for ethical thinking. If I do this, someone is going to be hurt. So let me think about that and recognize that before I do it. Carrie.
Would that be a little bit of an emotional management?
It could be.
Rational.
It could be, but I guess we're not really thinking about this as being a panic moment. Thinking about, a decision you're going to make in the future. You have plenty of time to think about it, plenty of time to think rationally on it. I like to try things. I like to keep trying worthwhile things, even if I get frustrated at first. Good.
Say high IQ and self-awareness.
Yes, high EQ. I'd say there's a little bit more going on than self-awareness. What do you think, Blake? If we had to choose one of the other two?
I'd say emotional.
Tell me why.
Because you're understanding that there's value in what you're getting frustrated with,
Yes, and I think that's self-awareness.
and it's internal. But you have the resiliency to keep at it.
Yeah, how about this way? Frustrated. If I get frustrated, I'm still able to keep at worthwhile things. I think that's where the emotional management piece comes in. So it's self-awareness, understanding is worthwhile, but if you get frustrated and you give up, that's low EQ because you're not able to manage those emotions. What do you think? Okay. Take it by your silence, you agree? My friends or family members sometimes make offhand remarks that I find intensely annoying. Great.
This might say more about me. I don't think that's either. You didn't do anything. It's just a feeling. You didn't say you acted on it.
Okay, it's all right if you're tense,
So,
as long as you don't shoot anyone.
You can be intensely annoyed and be fine with it as long as you don't express your annoyance.
Okay, so, all right, so this could be another question. If you're able to prevent yourself from acting on this in a way that hurts your relationships just because you're mad,
Right.
then that would be a high EQ person. And we'll get, and then let me ask this question and then we'll come back to your initial point. Does anyone want to make the point that this is a low EQ person? Rashi, what you got?
Because he or she is not able to control her or his emotions because he's in his life.
Okay. What I'd like to point out with this, all right, so your friends and family make an offhand remark that you find intensely annoying. So if you spend a lot of your time with your family and they make all these offhanded remarks and you always find them intensely annoying,
Just ignore it.
you should be able to just annoy them. And I like to bring up friends and families because they seem to be able to make these remarks that intensely annoy us more easily than strangers. Christian, you want to add something?
Like, how would that affect your own EQ that you're not actually doing? It's more so how you respond to it that determines your EQ regarding that.
Yeah, anyone want to answer Christian's question? So you're not actually, and this is Ricky's question too. You didn't do anything, All you did was sit at the family picnic and get really mad because of some offhanded remark that your sister made that reminded you of when you were kids and how you were always annoyed because she always did that thing. Arpit?
Well, I would say that's high EQ as long as you know, react right away.
Okay, yeah. And Ricky agrees with you, so as long as you don't take this to the next level, then you're able to demonstrate some EQ skills. Priya?
I think to that comment, I don't think a response has to be something you say or do, an emotional response to something.
Yeah.
So we can really control that.
Yeah, well, do you want to always be mad at these family gatherings? Do you want to be mad by an offhand remark that somebody says? Or do you want to be able to say, okay, that just kind of reminds me of how my sister always did this thing. I'm getting really mad, but I'm going to be able to let that go somehow. I'm going to be able to let that go two ways. One, as Ricky and Blake said, I'm not act on it to exacerbate the conflict. But two, I'm not going to sit at this family picnic and just be mad the whole time. It's just an offhanded remark. I'm going to put it in context. I'm going to somehow think about this in a way and realize that it was just an offhanded remark. My sister didn't have the EQ skills to say it in a way that was effective. Here.
The individual, like if you're being annoying, also can be that if you're really sitting with them at the dinner table, your emotions might affect others as well. So
you have incongruent verbal and non-verbal signals.
right, exactly.
That could be a problem.
And if your family and friends pick up on that, that might react negatively too. So
Yes. We'll get to this a little bit more when we talk about how our intentions is different than our impact, and if we don't have the skills to bridge those two, we call other people evil. But they're not evil; they just lack skills. Matt,
Is there such thing as being overadaptive?
like you're too EQ.
Would that be?
You should be mad
Can
because
it be like a bell curve kind of thing? Like as soon as you get past that one line, that limit, it's like you're just
you let people
you're back
walk
to
all
the
over
way
you,
you
kind of thing.
Yeah, it's because
Well-
at that point you're just appealing to everyone. You don't hold yourself to what you believe in.
Well, if you recall, there was a question I put up there. There was the first. It was the first one, I think. The first two. Yeah. I change my beliefs and values depending on who I am interacting with. No, you don't. You're able to express your values. You're able to express your beliefs. And we talked earlier about self-awareness. You're able to express your needs. You're going to say, this is what I need from this relationship. Because if you don't express that in a healthy way, you're going to express it in a non-healthy way. Arpit?
So to answer this question, I think it's self-awareness. If there's a limit, that you will adapt, or you have a good EQ that you realize, this situation isn't warranting me to be mad or react. But then there are certain situations that you can't just say, all right, I'm not going to get mad. Like there's a fine line, and once you cross that line, it's appropriate to get mad. Like, you know what I'm saying? If somebody steps over the line, that you're
Yes,
allowed to
okay.
get mad.
It could be appropriate to get mad. The only thing I would say is I don't want you to later say something you regret. I don't want you to say something that you later regret.
Yeah.
And I want you to have rational thought the entire time you're having this interaction. But if you later said, the only reason I got mad was because I lost my cool, or the only reason I said that is because I lost my cool, and it was a destructive result for the relationship. As long as you don't say that, then I say fine. You can say abrupt things, you can say poignant things, Alicia.
So for the last one that we were just talking about, can you still disagree with what the person said as long as it doesn't get you worked up? 'Cause that's
Yeah.
how I would read that one. You might disagree with it, right?
Yeah.
But just you don't get you worked up. You can
Right.
just let it go.
Right, you're able to put it in context somehow because you know that person doesn't have high EQ skills and wasn't able to say it in a way that you received it positively. All right, where are we?
Professor,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, because it seems like everyone is onto the family and close friends. I am too. So, okay, so if you don't say anything to demonstrate you have a high EQ, but then you notice that it is repetitive, so what do you just not go around because this person has no class, no clue, or how do you handle that? And you don't want to cause friction within your family or close friends.
Okay, so we'll talk about some ways to have a good conversation. I mentioned one earlier that our intentions are different than our impact. So if you confront that person, the impact might be this person is, saying she hates me, this person is attacking me, this person is criticizing me, right? That's not your intention. So what is some language you can use to show your intention? We'll go over some things to do that. Another thing we'll talk about is questions versus statements. Saying that was a terrible thing you just said is a statement. You might be able to pose that into a question, such as either finding more information about what that person meant by saying, you've never ever learned anything your entire life. What did you mean by that? Was that just kind of you're mad, or did you really mean? Were you trying to pick up on that conversation we had 2 Thanksgivings ago? Or you could ask the question, do you really mean that? So those are 2 strategies which we'll use: distinguishing intentions and impact, and using questions versus statements. Okay, where are we? I can tell when someone I'm talking with gets nervous, and I do my best to make them feel relaxed. Mike.
I would say high EQ, self-awareness.
I would say high EQ. Everything is a little bit self-awareness, but I
was thinking more of understanding your emotions.
Okay, is it your emotions you're understanding, or someone else's emotions? Somebody else's emotions. So in that case, Michael, it would also be
Emotional
social management. I'd say social management. So emotional management and self-awareness is always part, but understanding when someone else gets nervous and how you can interact with them, I would say it's a social management skill. And it doesn't matter that you get this or that right. I think this is a useful exercise because it allows us to think about putting these abstract situations into specific categories that we can work on. That's why I like to go through putting this in the three buckets. I've noticed that I have compulsive compulsive habits like biting nails or overeating, but I don't know why I have them and I cannot seem to stop them. Is someone, though, Karen?
Wouldn't that be more self-awareness?
Yeah, I would say more self-awareness, a little bit of emotional management.
It's like, you know what you're doing, but you know how it's happening, so.
Yeah, but I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to be the person that knows why you do what you do, so you can think about it and correct it. I'm aware of which types of professional social situations make me uncomfortable.
High EQ.
Yes, and all right. Anyone disagree? High EQ, Priya? Self-awareness? Yeah, you need to understand that about yourself. So going into this professional situation is going to make me nervous. I always get nervous when we talk about money, when we talk about asking for a raise. I know that's going to make my heart beat, so I'm going to practice my speech in a way that gives me some leverage or gives me some room if I get nervous. I just know I need to say these 3 things. I'm not going to say it boldly. I'm going to give myself an out something. I usually aren't. Social situations as well. Know how to prepare for that. When I walk into the party, I know I'm going to get nervous if I don't see anything. So before I get to the party, I'm going to take a deep breath, and even if I don't see anyone I know, I'm going to walk to the cracker table, take another deep breath, walk to the punch table, take another deep breath, and then I'm going to text someone. Something like that. Understanding that about yourself before you walk into that situation can be helpful. I insist on doing things my way. Just
Low EQ. Self-awareness.
okay. Self-awareness. I would say this is a hard one. Self-awareness. What else might it be? Shinfu?
I think it's the social management.
Social management is a piece. I would say all of them. Karen?
Yeah, it can be a bit emotional too, I think.
Yeah, just have to do things my way. I get a little thing that throws me off, and I lose my cool.
Can this depend on the context?
Okay.
Because I was going to say, if this is like Warren Buffett talking about investing, I'm pretty sure I'd listen.
Okay, Warren
As
Buffett.
opposed to this is like a kid pouting about something.
Yes, I mean, Warren Buffett, if he has a high EQ, would know that that is his strength. He would know how to explain. This is my strength. I mean, assuming everyone didn't know already. This is my strength, and this is why I insist on this investment strategy. If he had high EQ, I think he'd be able to explain that effectively. I try to ignore negative feelings. Okay, that's healthy, right?
Being low, EQ, and emotional management.
Yeah, a little bit of emotional management. I would say even more
Self-awareness.
self-awareness. Yeah. Got these negative feelings, let me be aware of that, think about how it's how it's hurting me. I think people usually have selfish or bad intentions. This is a good one. Halima.
I think this one is low. And is it social?
I think
Social
social.
awareness?
And I'm
Is
glad
that
you
talking
raised your
about
hand
other
because I thought of this in relationship to the question you just asked. So your friend and family member makes an offhanded remark. Do you assume they have a bad intention? Well, not if you have high EQ. You can empathize with them, understand that they just may not be skilled, they may not realize what they said, and they're stressed out because their boyfriend just dumped them or
I was
whatever.
going to say husband is cheating.
Husband is cheating. Okay. If I think people will disagree with me, I don't express my opinion. Gary.
Can I go back to the second one? I know I might be the victim here, but couldn't you argue that that might be high EQ since you, let's say you make mistakes or something that happened, like you report it because somebody lied to you or fraud or anything like that, and you gotta make sure the next time you deal with somebody, you have to be careful what you deal with.
Okay, so, all right, so this might be important if they really do have bad intentions.
Right. Which
Some,
often some people.
okay, so who wants to sound that out for me? Ricky?
I think there's a difference between not being naive and also just knowing that not everyone's a bad person, even one bad experience. Like taking a sample size and realizing that one out of, you're coming to people.
Yeah. And I would say, Carrie, this is more the knee-jerk reaction. No, you said that because you have bad intentions. No, they said that because they were trying to help you, or they're trying to help you improve your team.
I was more thinking, I understand what you're saying, but even though like one thing, for example, the Ponzi scheme, you literally you make so much money, but everything's gone, then it's like things like that.
Yeah. And again, I would say that this is the space of rational thought. This is the moment-to-moment knee-jerk reactions. We do not want to immediately assume that. But obviously we want to think through things rationally when we have more time, whether or not we're going to invest in this Ponzi scheme. If I think people will disagree with me, I don't express my opinion. Arpit?
Low and self-awareness.
Yes, low. Well, okay. Well, I might suggest it's not self-awareness because you know your opinion. Why do you think it's self-awareness?
Because you don't really necessarily understand yourself that, you let me rephrase that. So, you don't basically understand yourself to a quality and where your expertise are. If you think, any opinion you have, people will disagree, well, they're gonna disagree with some of them, but then if you're an expert at something, you should speak up.
Okay, all right. If I